Story recapped here.
Poor kid discovers teleportation, becoming a rich, loot vaults, and travel the world.
Today, I'm going to explain an action, adventure, sci-fi film called Jumper. Spoilers ahead. Watch out and take care. David Rice is a teenager living a normal life in a small rural town. He talks to Millie, a classmate whom he's attracted to. David gives Millie a snow globe as a gift, and Millie accepts it wholeheartedly. Another classmate, Mark, intervenes and takes the gift away, teasing David. Their classmate then throws the snow globe into the middle of a frozen lake, and David attempts to retrieve it. Millie tries to discourage him, but David continues. David gets to the snow globe, but the ice gives way, and he falls under. Millie runs to help, but David gets trapped under. The current drags David farther, and there's no chance he can get back onto the surface. Suddenly, he finds himself in the middle of the public library. David is completely disorientated and in complete confusion and shock, but tries to walk out of the library without arousing suspicion. David heads home, and his father, William, notes that he's late. David lives alone with his father, as his mother left him when he was a child. William asks where David had been, but he doesn't answer. William gets angry and chases David into his room. David locks his room, but William tries to force himself in. Just as William bursts in, David disappears and reappears in the library again.
Another TP.
David realizes that his newfound ability could be the key to a better life. He goes home and takes out some money he's saved. He decides to move to a bigger city and start a new life. David then tries to learn more about his abilities by practicing at a park, seeing if he can get better control of his powers. He looks through a tourist magazine and sees different tourist attraction sites all over the world, trying to teleport to those places. He sees the Empire State Building and remembers being there with his mother.
Don't fall down.
Things in his room suddenly start flying around, and he teleports to the Empire State Building. David then realizes that he can only teleport to places he's been to. With no money, David decides to use his powers to steal from a bank. He goes to a bank and asks to use the bathroom, and as he makes his way, he gets a glimpse of the interior of the bank's vault. That evening, David teleports into the vault and takes as much money as he can. He makes several trips, filling up his bag with each return. The following day, an investigation into the bank robbery begins. Roland Cox appears and tells the bank manager he works for the government. He then requests all video surveillance footage and the names of every person who has entered the bank in the past.
What the fuck is that?
Roland notes that the bank vault had never been opened, and authorities have no idea how the robbery was performed. Roland appears to have knowledge of people who can teleport and theorizes that the theft could have been committed by one of them. Several years pass, and David now lives in downtown New York at a penthouse apartment. David lives in excess, having everything he needs and doing whatever he wants. His apartment is filled with pictures of different locations around the world, and he even has a secret room where he keeps currencies from different countries. David then teleports to a bar in London, spotting a beautiful woman.
Ooh.
He teleports to her without caution, and another person, Griffin, sees him teleporting. He spends a night with the girl, and the following day, he heads out to Fiji to surf massive waves. He then heads to Egypt, having lunch on top of the Sphinx. In a tropical jungle, a man teleports, trying to escape. He teleports through the wilderness, but a cable is attached to him, rendering him unable to leave. Roland appears and walks up to him. The teleporter asks why Roland has done this to him, and Roland tells him that people who can teleport are abominations and must be exterminated. He then stabs the man, killing him. Roland then gets a phone call about the robbery that occurred several years back. David arrives back in New York at his apartment and discovers Roland is there. Roland tells David he's investigating a bank robbery, but he's not from the police. David asks Roland to leave, but Roland instead takes a baton and electrocutes David. David tries teleporting away but struggles to get farther than a few meters. Roland runs up, electrocuting David again and throwing him off a ledge.
No.
Roland then shoots a cable, attaching his baton to David. Roland attaches his baton to the floor, and this anchors David, disabling him from teleporting too far. David desperately tries to escape, teleporting to a hidden room in the wall and managing to cut off the cable. David takes several bags of money and disappears. He reappears back in his father's house in his old room. William hears David arriving and rushes to him. William begs David to stay, telling David that he's been unsure if he's going crazy on account of his son disappearing. David then tells William he's not going crazy but disappears just as quickly. The next day, David looks for Millie and finds her working at a local bar. He then runs into his old school bully, Mark, and they get into a brawl. David then ends up teleporting Mark into a bank vault and leaving him there. David returns to Millie, and the two catch up. David tells Millie that he's now in a banking profession and asks Millie how she's doing in the small town. Millie says she still dreams of traveling the world, and David offers her a trip to Rome with him. Millie is ecstatic hearing this and tells David she'd love to go with him. Behind them, Griffin is watching closely. A few hours later, David and Millie are in Rome, going to see the Colosseum. Meanwhile, Roland pretends to work for the CIA to get to Mark, who's at a police station. He asks him about what happened to him in the bank, and Roland learns of Millie and finds that she had just arrived in Rome. In Rome, David and Millie are at an apartment having a conversation about their lives and how they'd both hold out for the last couple of years. David and Millie then get romantic and share an intimate moment.
Hey! Toes! Oh my! Chaz, there any toes in there? Come on, don't lie to me, dude. I'm trying to watch a video, man.
Hold out for the last couple of years. David and Millie then get romantic and share an intimate moment, kissing passionately. Later that day, David sneaks Millie into the Colosseum, and they explore around, avoiding guards. David then separates from Millie to open a locked door and finally runs into Griffin. Griffin reveals himself to be another person who can teleport, referring to himself and others like him as jumpers. Griffin calls David out for his lavish and carefree lifestyle and tells him that a group of people called paladins are determined to kill all jumpers. Just as he explains, a pair of paladins appear. The paladins approach and take out their batons, and a fight breaks out. David tries to run but gets snagged by one of the electrified cables. His teleport ability is again disabled. Griffin then proceeds to fight the two paladins, quickly overpowering them. He disables both pursuers and tells David that he's been killing paladins for a long time. He then teleports away to his secret lair. David sees a residue called a jump scar from Griffin's jump and follows. Griffin warns him off, and David returns to Millie. David then now takes Millie away, leading her out of the Colosseum, but Millie demands an explanation for what is happening. Before David could start explaining, the police arrive and arrest David for breaking into the Colosseum. At the police station, David is questioned but maintains that he's only a tourist who violated rules and is sorry for it. The officers then leave David, telling him to wait for the magistrate from the U.S. Embassy. As David waits, a woman enters, and David recognizes it to be Mary, his mother. Mary tells David he only has 30 seconds before more paladins arrive and hands him a key to his handcuffs. Mary hurries back out, and David chases after her, but he loses her. David then meets back up with Millie, and the two head for the airport. At the airport, David tells Millie that they have to separate. Millie is disappointed to hear this but proceeds with her flight alone. Meanwhile, Roland arrives at William's house and introduces himself as part of the IRS. Roland asks about David, but William is unwelcoming and uncooperative. William tells Roland that he hasn't seen David for 8 years. He also mentions how Mary left him and David when David turned 5. William asks Roland to leave, but Roland refuses. David arrives at Griffin's hideout and sees Griffin's walls full of pictures and information about paladins around the world. David asks Griffin for an explanation as to why paladins are killing jumpers, and Griffin explains that the war has been going on since the Dark Ages. According to Griffin, the paladins are religious fanatics who believe that the power to teleport should only lie with God. He then tells David that paladins won't hesitate to kill anyone just to get to David. Realizing his father and Millie could be in trouble, David teleports to William and finds him unconscious on the floor. He teleports them to a hospital, and medical personnel rush to help William. David returns to Griffin's hideout wanting to get more information on Roland as he intends to kill him. Griffin says it's useless as he's been tracking Roland for more than 10 years, and with each encounter, Griffin only comes out with more scars. David offers to help catch Roland, but Griffin turns him down. Griffin then teleports to China, but David follows, still trying to convince Griffin to let him help. Griffin finally agrees when David tells him that he knows where Roland could potentially turn up next, pertaining to Millie. They decide to split up. David would get Millie while Griffin heads back to the hideout to arm himself.
Spoiler.
David arrives at Millie's apartment. Millie is surprised to see David again and tells him that she doesn't want to be associated with him anymore. Millie tells David to leave, but David hears Roland and a few more men arriving. With no other choice, David has to tell Millie the truth, revealing himself as a jumper. Millie is dumbfounded to witness David's powers and freaks out, running away. Knowing danger is upon them, David grabs her and teleports them both to Griffin's hideout. Roland and the other paladins enter Millie's apartment and see it empty, but Roland finds a jump scar. They take out a contraption, setting it below the jump scar, and a portal starts forming.
What?
They're attempting to reopen the jump scar so that they can follow David. David meets with Griffin, but Griffin is outraged seeing Millie there with them. Griffin tells David about the Paladin's machine and says bringing Millie to the hideout would only lead the Paladins right to them. David and Griffin check on the jump scar and see it getting larger. Seconds later, Roland appears. David and Griffin hide, but as David hides, he sees a picture of Mary on Griffin's wall of known paladins. David then gets tagged with an electrified cable and is pinned to a wall. Griffin comes in carrying a flamethrower. Griffin and Roland then get into a fight with Griffin using his teleporting abilities to gain the upper hand. Roland also puts up a good fight, utilizing the paladin's technology. Griffin punches Roland out of the hideout and teleports away, but returning with a running bus aimed directly at Roland. Roland has little time to react but still manages to dodge the oncoming bus.
Okay,
Millie finds David stuck to a wall, and she tries to get him free, but Roland appears ready to kill her. Millie stands frozen, but Griffin appears again with the flamethrower and blasts Roland back into the jump scar. Griffin jumps in after him. Roland and Griffin reappear back in Millie's apartment, and the fight continues. Back in the hideout, Millie successfully frees David but tells him that she wants to go home. She doesn't want to be involved in anything that's happening and just wants to get back to her normal life. David is left with no choice and agrees. As he prepares to take Millie back, Griffin reappears successfully, carrying the Paladin's jump scar opener. But with the jump scar still active, the Paladin still managed to launch a cable and captures Millie, taking her back to the apartment.
What?
David wants to rescue Millie, but Griffin prepares a bomb. David is confused, but Griffin tells him that this is his chance to end the Paladins once and for all. He intends to teleport to the apartment with the bomb. David protests and teleports away with the bomb. Griffin chases after him, and the two end up fighting, teleporting through many different locations. They teleport to Egypt, San Francisco, New York, all while fighting for the bomb's remote detonator. They end up in a war-torn country, and Griffin finally gets the detonator. But Griffin doesn't see that a pylon is falling on top of them. David teleports Griffin into the pylon, letting the massive amount of electricity capture Griffin, pinning him down. Griffin tries to discourage David into returning to the apartment, saying he won't stand a chance against 5 paladins, but David is determined to rescue Millie. David returns to the apartment and gets to Millie but is immediately stung by 5 electrified cables that the paladins anchor to the apartment. David struggles, still focusing on teleporting away. This causes the entire apartment to shake violently. With the wires attached to David in the apartment, every time David tries to teleport, the apartment also goes with him. He grunts and shouts, and the apartment walls jolt and crack. Finally, he teleports the entire apartment back to the lake, where he discovered his abilities. Most of the paladins are disabled, and some of them drown, and David then teleports the apartment back to the library. David regains consciousness and sees that Roland is still alive. David then takes Roland and abandons him somewhere in the middle of the Grand Canyon. Time passes, and David locates his mother. Mary's daughter answers the door, and David and Mary finally talk. Mary explains that she's also a paladin. When David teleported for the first time at the age of 5, Mary made the difficult decision to leave him to protect him from the other paladins. Now that they've reunited, David asks what would happen. Mary then answers that she would give him a head start. David then returns to Millie waiting for him outside. The two hold hands, smile at each other and teleport away. Subscribe to watch more videos like this. Turn on notifications.
That was pretty good. That was pretty good. I enjoyed it. I think the only problem with the... I wish they made a good effort, as good of an effort to explain the beginning of the plot, and then explain the end of the plot. So I wish they had a big concentration of explanation at the beginning and at the end, and had it kind of like an accordion. Because it's the two most important things.